Everybody. Good morning. Let's see, getting everyone logged in here. Can you all hear me and see me okay? Looks like a few of you are in here with me at the moment. I just want to make sure everything is coming through just fine. I see the video, but just checking on the audio. Can you hear me okay? Great. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. So strange that sometimes it shows up fine and sometimes it doesn't. But good afternoon. I almost said good morning. Good afternoon and welcome. Happy February 15th. It is Wednesday. I hope you all had a wonderful Valentine's Day if you celebrate. I got a cake for yesterday, so that made it a fun day. We don't normally celebrate Valentine's too much, but I got a cake. Which always makes any day better. And then, of course, we had the Super Bowl since I saw you last. Great game, so-so on the halftime show and commercials. I don't know if you would agree or not. But thank you so much again for being on here with me. I hope you're all doing well and hanging in there. We are in week number 6 of the semester at this point, which is really hard to believe. We're like a third of the way done. Yes, it was such a good game, all the way down to the last minutes and a controversial holding call, and Mahomes won, so I was excited for that. Definitely was a really good game. Did you all like the halftime show? I've heard mixed things in terms of people's opinions about Rihanna's performance. Pretty cool that they were floating up there in the air like that. I wouldn't want to do that. But a lot of people said they didn't love it, especially because she was very, very obviously lip syncing to the music. She pulled the mic away so many times and it just kept going, which is always a little bit entertaining. But yes, it was a great Super Bowl. I will move on, but just big thing since I saw you all last. So what I want to do today is give you a little bit of feedback about last week. As usual, I want to talk a little bit about the discussion. Have a little bit more feedback maybe than typical in terms of that this week. It tripped a few people up, and so I want to make sure everyone's feeling good and clear. And then I want to talk a little bit about this week. We do have another homework assignment due, so I want to go through that, make sure you're feeling good about it. And then, of course, I'll see if you have questions. I'll give you the extra credit question, and we'll go from there. So, let's go ahead and jump over to Canvas together. And as I said, we are in week number 6, which is hard to believe, halfway through February already at this point. But let's go back. Well, my dog had a lot to say. The advantages and disadvantages of being at home, right? So I want to go back to last week really quickly and talk a little bit about the discussion and some of the things that I read in the assessments. So let's start with the assessment because that's kind of quick, and then I'll get into the discussion. Thank you for your honesty. A lot of you seem to be feeling good about the class, good about your grade, your understanding the materials. It seemed like most of you are in a really good spot. I hope that's genuine and you weren't just telling me what I want to hear, but it seems like a lot of you are happy with how you're performing, happy with your score on that first exam, happy in general, right? And so thank you for your feedback on that. Continue to use your grades as a learning experience and grow from them, or keep doing what you're doing if it's working. The discussion for last week. So last week we started talking about kind of core materials a little bit more, and that's where we'll go obviously for the rest of the semester. And so I want to talk a little bit about the discussion. Overall, I was really happy with what I saw. A lot of you did a beautiful job of talking about the types of claims, talking about things that could be defined a little bit better, right? There were definitely some terms in that article that weren't operationalized. And if we don't define what we mean by success, or what we mean by reading, or what we mean by screen time, how are we going to measure it? Right? Because it can mean something different to each person. And so that's a really big part of what we were covering last week, defining those variables, defining those elements so that we can measure them consistently. That creates a lot of problems if we don't do that. So a lot of you did a great job identifying those, talking about some directionality issues, really nicely done. What I want to go into though was number 2. So some of you nailed this, and I felt like a proud parent reading your discussions. But if you look at number 2, what I wanted you to think about is the author making, what type of claim are they making, and is it justified? So a lot of you said that she was making, that they were making an association claim, right? That they were talking about the naturally existing relationship between two things, and then you kind of went on to support that. So a little tricky, but the author was trying to make a lot of causal claims. They were implying that X leads to Y, right? That screen time is ruining your family's life, that there is a cause, right? There's a causal element to it, but they didn't have the ability to make a causal claim. And a few of you really got at this really well. So what I wanted you to talk a little bit about was they didn't manipulate or try and control any variables. All they did was look at naturally existing relationships between two things. And we can take any two variables and talk about the naturally existing relationship between them. I can talk about, next to me, the number of pairs of scissors that people have compared to their grades in a class, right? So you can take literally any two things and talk about how they're connected or not connected to each other. And a lot of you just thought that it was an association claim. So they made claims that were causal, but they didn't have the ability to do that. They didn't manipulate anything. They didn't try and control for anything. And so a few of you lost some points there for kind of not making that connection. But otherwise, I was really impressed with your short summaries. I was impressed with your discussion of examples of terms and your third variables and directionality. Just remember that we always want to look at, did they manipulate or did they measure? Did they try to control anything or did they just go with what's naturally existing? And so we're starting to get a little more complicated, but again, several of you really nailed that. So nicely done. And that was probably the biggest reason why people lost points, just this one on number 2. But overall, nice job. We're going to build on what we did last week with our topic this week. We're covering the second half of that chapter. But are there any other questions, thoughts, comments, points of confusion, anything about week number 5 and chapter 3 part 1 before we move on to week number 6 and chapter 3 part 2? I'll give you just a moment. I just want to make sure that everybody is feeling as good as they can about the materials. Everything is going to build on what comes before it. So if you're feeling a little confused now, you might want to go back and kind of rewatch the lecture videos, because we're only going to make it more layered, right? I won't say more complicated, just add more layers to it. And so if you were a little confused now, we want to make sure that we reverse that so that you don't get more and more confused as we go along. Okay. I feel like I'm starting to get sick. My voice is all scratchy. Maybe I did too much yelling during the Super Bowl. That might be it. All right. So I'm not seeing any, questions or comments or thoughts or anything. So I'm just going to keep going. If you think of something, put it in the chat. But for week number 6 for this week, we move on to chapter 3, part 2. Okay, so we're looking at the second half of chapter 3. And so now what we're going to do is kind of look at how do we evaluate frequency, association, and causal claims. We get into ideas related to variables. We're going to talk about independent and dependent variables, different types of validity. So again, we're building on what we talked about last week. Last week, we talked about the different types of claims. Now we're going to look at different types of validity. How do we evaluate claims? And then independent and dependent variables and their different levels. On the Beyond the Book page, I have a little bit about experiments versus correlation, something that we'll continue to build on. Really starting to get into independent and dependent variables, right? So I gave you a lot of examples on how we could look at independent and dependent variables and identifying them. And so make sure you spend some time reading through this and looking at them and really highlighting the things that are on this Beyond the Book. I also talked a little bit more about the big 4 validities that are a big focus for this week. And then on the last page, as always, you have the key terms that you need to know for this chapter. So again, read through everything. You can listen to it or read it depending on your preference. This is also going to be really helpful. I made you a lecture video as I do every week. But what I did here is I went through and lectured on this part of the chapter. So this is going to be really helpful for you in understanding those materials. Take notes, pay attention. It should be hopefully quite helpful. Now, as always, you have a discussion this week. You also have a homework assignment, number 2. So let's talk about the discussion first, and then we can talk about the homework assignment. So for discussion number 6, as always, you're going to want to start by watching my video where I really go through this in detail. So I'm kind of just highlighting on these check-ins here on Twitch, but make sure that you watch the whole video. So I give you a lot of information and details. Answer all of my questions, really elaborate, show off your knowledge, think about these as mini papers. Remember that they're worth 15 points in total, 13 for your responses to my questions, and then 2 for your responses to a classmate. So make sure you're getting those easy 2 points every week. So what you're looking at here in the discussion, and this is going to connect quite a bit to the homework assignment. I tried very hard to make everything line up and connect in a very sensical way. So I hope that you have that experience on your end. But you're going to read these 2 studies and then answer the questions for each of them. So study number 1 is about Dr. Stevens and her research assistants. And study 2, we're looking at like a kombucha-based study. So read through it, and then you're going to answer 3 questions for each one. Is this a correlational study, or is it an experiment? Again, something that we've really been focusing on. If it's correlational, I want you to tell me what direction is the correlation or association. Is it positive, negative, or 0? If it's an experiment, what is the independent variable and what is the dependent variable? If you want to get fancy, you could tell me the levels of it, right? But what are the independent and dependent variables? And then from this study, can we conclude that income causes an increase in self-esteem and explain why or why not? So really building on what we have been learning in the lecture and in the book. And then for study 2, same thing. Is it correlational or is it an experiment? If it's correlational, is it a positive, negative, or 0 association or correlation? And if it's an experiment, what's the independent and dependent variable? And can we conclude that kombucha causes better recall? Explain why or why not. So you're putting your ability to identify correlation versus causation to the test. You're putting your ability to identify what type of correlation or what the independent and dependent variables are and how that affects the conclusions. So again, as always, think about it as like a mini paper. Elaborate, show off your knowledge. Don't forget to reply to a classmate. And that is discussion number 6, connected to the chapter. You also have homework assignment number 2. And again, this should be relatively connected. My goal is to kind of make them all make sense. And just like the last homework assignment, this one is worth 25 points. So more than a discussion, less than an exam. Definitely take it seriously. It should be a couple of pages, typed, double-spaced, standard font, kind of getting into those like typical APA formatting things. I'd also really like you to number and label your responses. Make sure it's really obvious which question you are answering, especially because there are 5 different questions here. Make sure that you are answering them and labeling them so I know which one you are actually answering. So what you will do is you'll read through the 5 questions, and then you're going to answer them, right? And your answers are going to be due by this Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. You can, because this is a homework assignment, you can submit this late at a penalty of 10% off per day. So definitely better to do than late than not at all. But make sure that you are answering all 5 questions. And these questions are directly linked to the topics that we're covering. Question 1 is a wonderful kind of summary here. You're going to see a very similar question to this on the next exam. But you're looking at 3 different professors who have some concerns about the research that they're doing. And so for each of them, you're going to identify what type of validity they're concerned about and why. So tell me, Dr. Lopez is concerned about which type of validity, Shaw and Jefferson, and give me a little bit of an explanation about which validity they are concerned about and how that connects. And then for 2 through 5, you're going to read the little scenario and then identify the independent variable and its levels, and the dependent variable and how it's being operationalized or measured. So for example, a pharmacologist is testing whether a new anti-anxiety medication, MoodCore, will cause people to gain weight. To test this, she gives 100 people MoodCore for 1 month and 100 people a placebo drug. At the end of the month, she monitors any weight gain by having them weigh in on a scale. So using that example, you would tell me what is the independent variable and the different levels or different conditions that are part of it. Then you're going to tell me what is the dependent variable and how are we measuring it? How is it being operationalized? And you'll do that for each of 2, 3, 4, and 5. And 1 was a little different, again, identifying the types of validities. So you will type this up as a separate document and you'll be submitting it right here. When you click start assignment, it'll give you a spot to upload it. Remember, just like last time, these are the formats that are allowed. So doc, docx, PDF, and RTF. Again, 25 points and due by this Sunday at 11:59 p.m. This is going to directly connect to the discussion, to the content for this week. Hopefully between all of those elements, you'll have a very solid understanding. And we'll talk next week about the answers for this, making sure they're clear for you. But are there any questions? Let me put this in here. Any questions at all about homework assignment number 2? Is there anything that I can answer about that for you? Anything you're confused about? So we have the lecture, read the book, do the lecture, watch the lecture video, complete the discussion, complete the homework assignment. I just want to make sure you're feeling good about it. Good. Sounds good to you. That's great. Hopefully that means it's good to everybody. I just want to make sure you're all feeling good about it as good as possible. Good. Okay, so it sounds like it's clear to all of you. That's fantastic. If you think of any other questions, put them in the chat or email me if it comes up later. You do have one other element, as usual. You have the extra credit question, which I will give you in a moment. A couple of quick reminders for you. The first one is our next Twitch live stream will be on February 22nd at 12:30 p.m. as usual. Sorry, I said that so slowly, but I'm just putting that here in the chat. So our next Twitch live stream will be next week on the 22nd, 12:30, like always. The other thing I really want to remind you is because we are in week 6. Okay, great. Yeah, you can ask me, Susanna, at the end. That's perfect. There were about 30 to 40 of you between my classes that were subscribed. I'm down to like 3 or 4 or 5 people. If your subscription has expired, please take a moment to renew it. It's good for 30 days. You'll have to do it a couple more times throughout the semester. But I am having to look everyone up. Those of you who are watching this later, I have no way of knowing that you're watching it later. So if you can, please take a moment today, right now, sometime this week, to renew that. I would really greatly appreciate it. I know you all know how valuable time is, especially when we have a lot going on. And I'm taking a lot of time to find those of you who are watching it and try and see who's watching it later. So if you could take a moment, you just go onto my Twitch page. On that little purple drop-down bar under the banner, you can select resubscribe for free again with that Twitch Prime subscription. I really do appreciate it. It makes a big difference in timing for me, and I can much more easily track who's here. So sorry to keep asking, but again, it's a lot of time and effort, and I really enjoy being able to do this for all of you, but I also need to be able to track you. So thank you for those of you who are doing that. Other than that, let me give you the extra credit question. And then if you have any questions for me, like a couple of you have said, I will hang out and you can let me know. So let me put this here in the chat. Here is the extra credit, and this is just going to be something that hopefully helps you with everything else that we have going on this week. So the week number 6 Twitch extra credit question is, what are the 4 big validities? I would like you to list and define all 4 of them. So there are 4 big validities that we're focusing on this week, and they've come up a couple of times in our assignments and in the reading and in the lecture. So list them and define them for me, and that will give you the opportunity to hopefully keep reinforcing that knowledge. When you're ready to answer that question, you'll go right here to optional Twitch extra credit number 6. Click on that. And then up at the top, click on Start Assignment. And then that will bring up the text box where you can type your response as usual. And then when you have your response ready, you hit submit, get the confetti burst, and then, oh, I think those were unicycles and panda bears. That's so random. But that'll be how you can get those 2 points of extra credit. Remember that everything for this week, including the extra credit, is due by Sunday night, the 19th at 11:59 p.m. So make sure that you get all of that done and get completed. The homework assignment, especially, that's worth a lot of points. Try and go back and subscribe if you haven't already, or if you need to renew it, that would be amazing. Otherwise, what I will do is I will hang out for a little while. If you have any questions for me, you're welcome to put them in the chat and ask, and I will answer them. Otherwise, have a wonderful week. I hope you're all doing well and hanging in there. Thank you, thank you. Oh, it's okay, and you probably don't notice that it expires. That's why I remind you. So don't worry about that. But I'm just reminding you every week so that you do remember to check. If people don't remind me, I won't check either. So no worries. I completely understand. So I'm going to minimize my video, but I will still be here for a little while if you have any questions. I know, Susanna, you said you had a question. If you'd like to put that in the chat. Twitch number 4. Okay. Huh, that's strange. So yeah, the one of them I posted two separate videos because for some reason it cut off. At this point, that's 2 weeks ago, so it's a little late to turn that in. But just make sure you keep doing them. It's something like 32 points altogether in extra credit. So hopefully that one won't harm you at all. But if that ever happens again, you can let me know. I know you emailed me at the time. That's strange. I thought I had posted both videos so that you could have done it. Yeah, I remember you emailing me about it. So yeah, at this point, I would say don't worry about number 4. Did you get? Hopefully, you got the one from today. And if that ever happens again, I will definitely make sure to post it somewhere so that you can see it. Sometimes the internet just makes it so difficult, doesn't it? When it's working, it's great. When it's not working, it's a pain. So perfect, perfect. You're welcome. See you next week. See you next week. Thank you so much for joining me.